Hello, I'm Ellie Moser, and this is the process I use to evaluate and weed within a school library. I chose to focus on the picture book section, also called Easy Readers, because only half of the section was weeded last school year. The books are organized by the author's last name. After a quick visual inspection, I noticed that the L's and M's were not necessarily overcrowded, but they were fuller than the other shelves and had many books that were worn. In these pictures, I've highlighted with shapes the old and worn books. To start the weeding process, I first ran a circulation report for the bottom 50 titles in the L through M Easy section. The books on this list had 0 checkouts in the last 5 years. Then I went to the shelf and started working my way down the list. A few of the books were still in good condition, they were just added, and possibly some of these books still looked relevant. I didn't make the full way down the list before I started noticing ratty books. So I began working on step 1, the circulation data, and step 2, the condition simultaneously. This made the process faster. As I made note of the ugly books, I considered whether or not they needed to be completely discarded from the collection or repurchased. Also, during this process, I considered my students and my fellow teachers. Since this is fiction weeding, looking at the publication date is not an automatic cull or keep method, but it isn't obsolete either. While it was rare for me to check the publication date on the books, I did look at the illustrations closely. Just like we can tell a movie's age by the graphics, we can often tell a book's age by the illustrations. When scanning the illustrations, I looked at the style for any bias or stereotypes, outdated materials like box TVs and computers, or anything that wouldn't socially make sense to the students unless it was a historical fiction book. For example, I decided to put 9 for California on the weeding list due to its low, well, almost non existent circulation status and outdated language regarding Indigenous Americans. It doesn't align with current teachings of that historical era. My school uses benchmark reading curriculum. This curriculum comes with an entire class set of books. So the teachers don't have to use the library's easy section, but they do check out books for read alouds, for special events, or fan favorites. So I made sure to avoid weeding those or put them on a list to reorder if the title was in bad shape. For example, I put 2 copies of Brown Bear on the list because of its condition, but we still have 4 in the system. So this isn't something that we necessarily need to reorder since we still have 4 copies that are in good condition. This book, with a copyright date of 1967, is a great example of why fiction books are not weeded by date alone. Books in the easy section are mostly checked out by students to make gains in their reading and skills and become lifelong readers, which means that they need to enjoy the books. Therefore, I focused heavily on keeping books that would attract them to the shelf and keep them reading. In total, I selected 64 books to weed. Some were very easy decisions. However, award winners, like number 8 on this list, Black and White by David McAlee, needed further consideration. It was in terrible condition and it hadn't had any checkouts in a few years, but since it was an award winner, I decided to read the book. And after doing so, it did not seem like something that my students would ultimately enjoy. So I put it on the list. On part 2 of the list, number 4, Penny Lee and her TV provides a great example of outdated illustrations. The TV shown in the illustrations is a box TV, so I weeded this book due to that and also its condition. On this section of the list, it was admittedly very hard for me to put Mercer Mayer books on the list. They were a favorite of mine as a child, but they were in terrible shape. They have seen a few circulations, but not enough to warrant putting them on a repurchase list. Also, the weeding process isn't about me, it's about the patrons. Just because it's a book I like doesn't mean that it belongs in the collection. The last part of this list feels a little bit like I'm picking on Robert Munsch, but the books looked very dated due to the illustrations and the binding type. Plus, they saw very little circulation, and many of them were on the no circulation list. Sorry, Mr. Munsch. The disposal process, there is no district policy, but all of the school media specialists in the county follow a similar process. The weeding process is easy, but it does take time. Step 1, all the books need to be scanned so that there is a record that they are deleted from the system. Step 2, write discard over every single barcode, cross the school name, that is on the front of the book and inside the book. You rip off the barcode and put the barcode in the trash. And finally, step 3 is we physically discard the books by trashing it if it's moldy, generally yucky, or if it contains inaccurate information. For all other books, teachers and students may use the pages for art projects. Rarely are these books usable for anything other than art projects, and any book that is not used is quietly taken to the dumpster. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my process. Evaluating collections and weeding ensures that our school libraries are attractive and user-friendly for all staff and students.